There is a moment, you have felt it before, a quiet, almost invisible moment where something inside you shifts, where you look at a person, a place, a situation you have been gripping for so long, and you feel it. That slow, heavy realization that this is no longer where you belong, that staying is costing you something you are running out of, that the version of you fighting to hold this together is not growing. It is disappearing. That moment is the beginning of one of the most powerful psychological processes a human being can experience. It is the moment you start to seriously consider walking away. And most people, when that moment arrives, do everything in their power to talk themselves out of it. They feel it, acknowledge it somewhere private and quiet, and then bury it beneath excuses. They convince themselves to try one more time. They tell themselves that leaving is the same as losing, and so they stay. They stay in roles that hollow them out. They stay in connections that no longer nourish them. They stay in versions of their lives that stopped fitting years ago. And the longer they hold on, the more distant the person they used to be becomes. This is not a video about abandoning hard things the moment they become inconvenient. It is not a call to quit at the first sign of friction. This is about something far more nuanced. This is about learning to tell the difference between something worth fighting for and something that has been quietly fighting against you the whole time. Because that distinction, and your willingness to face it honestly, will determine the direction of your entire life. Let us begin with the reason most people find it nearly impossible to leave even when every instinct they have is telling them to go. It is not because they lack awareness. It is not because they enjoy being in pain. It is because the human brain is fundamentally wired for attachment. From your earliest days, your mind was building connections to people, to environments, to emotional patterns. That attachment is not just psychological. It is neurological. When you have been embedded in a dynamic long enough, your brain constructs entire neural networks around it. Leaving does not just feel difficult. At a biological level, it can register as a threat to survival. Psychologists have a name for one of the core traps that keeps people stuck. It is called the sunk cost fallacy. The principle is straightforward but devastating in practice. The longer you have invested in something, the more time, energy, love, and sacrifice you have poured into it, the harder your mind makes it to walk away. Not because the investment is paying off, but because your brain cannot tolerate the idea that everything already given was given for nothing. So you keep adding to the pile. You keep hoping the return will eventually justify the cost. But the cost keeps climbing, and the return never comes. Consider the last time you had a knowing. Not a passing doubt, but a real, settled deep in your chest knowing that something was no longer right for you. Maybe it was a friendship where the effort had become entirely one-directional. Maybe it was a professional path you were walking for someone else's dream. Maybe it was a relationship where you had been making yourself smaller for so long that you had almost forgotten your original shape. That knowing was not anxiety. That knowing was not weakness. That was your psychology doing its job, trying to direct you toward your own survival. Most people override it. The ones who honor it tend to be the ones who eventually find their way. Here is something uncomfortable that most people are never told directly. A significant portion of the fear around walking away has very little to do with the thing being left behind. It has everything to do with what leaving feels like as a statement about the person leaving. Exiting something feels like a public admission. It feels like raising your hand and announcing that you misjudged, that you overestimated, that you were wrong. The ego resists that narrative fiercely. So instead of acknowledging that something has run its course, people revise their own perception of reality. The bar shifts downward, quietly, incrementally, until things that would have once been unacceptable become simply normal. And that slow normalization gets called patience. It gets called maturity. But in a great many cases, what it actually is avoidance wearing a virtuous disguise. The psychology of walking away does not begin with a decision. It begins with an honest look. A genuine, unflinching examination of what something is right now, not what it was at the beginning. not what it might become under better conditions, not the version of it that exists only in your hopes. What is it today in the actual life you are living? That question sounds simple. It is one of the hardest things a person can genuinely confront, because real clarity comes with real responsibility. Once you see something for exactly what it is, you can no longer pretend you did not see it. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that accumulates in people who have stayed past the point of honesty. It is not the satisfying tiredness of effort well spent. It is not something a good night of rest addresses. It settles deeper than that, in the chest, in the disposition, in the way a person carries themselves through the day. It is the weight that forms when someone has spent months or years in a constant state of management, managing expectations, managing disappointment, managing the distance between what they were promised and what they were given. If you recognize that feeling right now, do not dismiss it as ordinary stress. That exhaustion is information, and it has been trying to reach you for a while. The people who walk away and never look back are not people who feel nothing. That is a fundamental misreading of who they are. Most of them feel deeply, sometimes painfully so. What distinguishes them is not emotional detachment. It is a particular relationship with self-respect. At some point they arrived at a quiet, unshakable understanding that no connection, no circumstance, no fear of loneliness was worth the ongoing cost of abandoning themselves. That understanding did not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it came at 2 a.m. Sometimes it came after the 100th iteration of the same conversation going nowhere. But when it arrived, it stayed. One of the most psychologically misread behaviors is choosing to leave without offering an extended explanation. The people who do this are frequently described as cold, avoidant, or emotionally underdeveloped. But consider what often precedes that silence. Months or years of communicating clearly, of expressing needs, of extending chances, of trying to bridge a gap that kept reopening. When all of that produces nothing, no genuine shift, no acknowledgement, no movement, the person who goes quiet is not being immature. They are simply done spending their remaining energy trying to make someone understand a value they have already decided not to recognize. Something worth examining is what the brain actually goes through in the aftermath of leaving. The initial experience is grief, and it arrives with a force that catches most people off guard. This is one of the cruelest ironies of walking away from something harmful. The exit still hurts. Because you are not only leaving the situation itself, you are leaving the future you had constructed around it. The plans, the expectations, the particular version of your life that included that person or that chapter. Grief is not a signal that the departure was a mistake. It is simply the honest emotional cost of closing something that once mattered. And then, gradually, not immediately, but gradually, something different enters the space where the weight used to be. A stillness. A gradual quieting of the mental noise you had been living inside for so long that you stopped hearing it as noise. The replaying of conversations begins to slow. The low-grade tension in your body begins to release. And somewhere in that emerging quiet, a voice that had been nearly drowned out starts to become audible again. It is yours. The one that belongs to the version of you that existed before you, redirected so much of yourself toward holding something else together. Understanding the distinction between walking away and simply running away matters enormously here. Running away is fear-based. It is reactive and impulsive. It is what happens when discomfort becomes unbearable and escape feels like the only available option. The problem with running is that the unresolved pattern travels with you right into the next relationship, the next environment, the next chapter. Walking away operates from an entirely different internal place. It is grounded in self-knowledge. It is the choice of a person who has examined what they are leaving and made a deliberate decision about where they are heading instead. People who have the hardest time with this often share a specific history. They were taught, at a formative age, that their worth was conditional, that they earned their place through usefulness, through being needed, through being the one who stayed, through enduring what others would not. And that belief, absorbed early and reinforced over years, makes the idea of departure feel like a personal failure rather than an act of wisdom. If that resonates with you, the conversation you are really having is not about whether to leave a situation. It is about whether you are allowed to prioritize yourself. And the answer to that, categorically, is yes. You will face resistance when you start honoring your own limits and your own sense of what is and is not working for you. People will call it selfishness. They will invoke the history, the investment, the potential you are supposedly discarding. Some of those people will genuinely believe what they are saying. But here is a truth worth carrying with you. The people who truly respect you will not require you to diminish yourself as a condition of their presence. Anyone who insists that your departure is a betrayal was never primarily concerned with your well-being to begin with. There's a reframe that changes everything for people who have been trapped in indecision for too long. Walking away is not the ending of something. It is the first genuine sentence of whatever comes next. Every person whose life shifted dramatically for the better at some point made a decision to stop pouring themselves into a vessel that was never going to hold them. That decision was not always clean. It was not always applauded. But it created the opening through which something real could finally enter. What leaving something difficult actually reveals about a person is more interesting than most people expect. It does not reveal that they are a quitter. It reveals that they have developed the capacity to survive loss without being destroyed by it. And that capacity, the proven knowledge that you can release something significant and still rebuild your footing, becomes one of the most durable forms of confidence a human being can carry. Every time you survive what you feared would undo you, the fear of the next transition shrinks a little, and you become, gradually, someone who makes decisions from strength rather than from dread. There's also something that walking away forces you to confront about your own patterns. When you finally step back from a situation with enough distance to see it clearly, you begin to notice not just what the other person or environment was doing, but what you were doing in response. The ways you bent yourself, the compromises you normalized, the moments you dismissed your own instincts because the alternative felt too uncertain. That kind of self-examination is not comfortable. But it is the work that ensures you do not reconstruct the same dynamic somewhere new with a different face attached to the same role. The idea that leaving requires a justification strong enough to satisfy everyone watching is one of the more damaging myths around this subject. You do not owe the world a verdict. You do not need external consensus before you are permitted to honor your own experience. The standard is not whether your reason would hold up in front of people who have never lived a single day inside your circumstances. The standard is whether it is true for you, whether it reflects what you actually know about where you are and where you need to go. Something nobody discusses enough is the physical dimension of staying somewhere you should have left. The body registers what the mind tries to rationalize away. Persistent low-level anxiety, tension that never fully resolves, sleep that does not restore, an undercurrent of unease that follows you into spaces that should feel peaceful. These are not coincidences. These are the body's ongoing attempt to communicate what the conscious mind keeps finding reasons to ignore. The mind can construct elaborate justifications for staying. The body simply reports what is actually happening. Walking away also changes your relationship with time in a way that is difficult to articulate until you have experienced it. When you are embedded in something that is not right for you, time has a particular quality: heavy, circular, slightly suffocating. The same conversations repeat. The same hopes rise and fall. The same disappointments arrive in slightly different packaging. But time, after a genuine departure, moves differently. It opens. It begins to feel like something you are moving through rather than something you are waiting to survive. There are people in your life right now who have walked away from things that would have consumed them and who are quietly, profoundly better for it. They may not speak about it often, but you can see it in how they carry themselves, in the clarity behind their eyes, in the way they talk about their own lives with ownership rather than resignation. That quality, that particular kind of settled, unhurried confidence, is not the result of luck. It is the residue of hard, honest choices made in private moments when the easier path was absolutely still available. Let us address the version of you that knows it is time but keeps finding reasons to postpone. You are waiting for the right moment. You are waiting for conditions to improve enough that leaving will feel clearly justified. You are waiting for something external to happen that grants you permission to go. But here is what is almost certainly true. The perfect moment is not coming. The conditions will not arrange themselves into something so obviously terminal that departing becomes effortless. The permission you keep searching for has to originate from inside you. It was always going to have to come from there. What travels with you when you leave, and this matters, is not nothing. You carry the growth. You carry the hard-earned self-knowledge. You carry the understanding of what you need, what you can offer, and what you are no longer willing to accept. None of what you went through was wasted if you carry those lessons forward honestly. The experience shaped you. It cost you something real. But it also gave you a map, a detailed, visceral understanding of where you do and do not belong, that no easier path could have provided. Self-compassion is not optional in this process. It is structural. The habit of looking back at your timeline with contempt, of asking why you took so long, why you did not see it sooner, why you accepted what you accepted, is understandable, but it is counterproductive. You were doing the best you could with the information and the emotional resources available to you at each point. Understanding why you stayed as long as you did is useful. Punishing yourself for it leads nowhere. One produces growth. The other produces another version of the same trap. Here is something worth sitting with. The life you are imagining, the one that feels cleaner, more honest, more aligned with what you actually value, that life does not become available through more endurance of what is currently diminishing you. It becomes available through a decision, a single, clear-eyed decision that what you have been managing is not what you are meant to be building, and that you are prepared to trade the familiarity of now for the uncertainty of something genuinely better. Walking away is an act of trust. It requires trusting yourself enough to believe that what exists on the other side of this decision has the potential to be more aligned with who you actually are than what you are leaving behind. That trust is harder to access when your confidence has been worn down. When you have been in an environment that questioned your judgment or your perceptions for long enough, trusting your own read on reality can feel uncertain. But that instinct you have been second-guessing, it has been consistent. It has been patient, and it has been accurate for far longer than you have been willing to admit. The clearest signal that it is time is not always dramatic. It is often subtle. It is the morning you wake up and realize that the thought of things continuing exactly as they are feels heavier than the thought of starting over completely. It is the moment the unknown becomes less frightening than the certainty of more of the same. When that shift happens inside you, when staying starts to feel like the greater risk, do not dismiss it. That is not despair arriving. That is clarity. So here is where all of this converges. If something has been sitting at the back of your mind throughout this video, a situation, a relationship, a pattern, then you already know what your next honest step is. You did not come across this content by accident. You have been circling this decision for a while. You have been gathering perspective and waiting for something to move the needle. Consider this that thing. You do not need the situation to become catastrophic before your departure is warranted. You do not need to be completely broken down to justify rebuilding. You are allowed to leave something that is simply wrong for you. You are allowed to choose alignment over familiarity. You are allowed to decide that your peace, your direction, and your future carry more weight than the discomfort of transition. Not every chapter in a life is meant to continue. Some of the most significant chapters are the ones that end. The friendships that concluded because both people grew beyond the version of themselves that formed the original bond. The careers that finished because the person inside them had become someone the role no longer served. The relationships that closed because what they were built on had shifted beyond honest repair. None of those endings were failures. They were completions. And completions, when honored with honesty, create the space for what is genuinely next. The version of you that you are in the process of becoming cannot fully take shape while your energy is allocated to something that is already ended in every way except officially. That version requires room. It requires the specific kind of room that only opens when you stop filling it with what is no longer yours to carry. You have been attempting to build something new while holding something old with both hands. Eventually, you have to put one of them down. Whatever you decide to walk away from, do it from a settled, considered place. Not from anger, not from a peak moment of frustration, not from spite. From a consistent internal knowing that you return to again and again over time. Because decisions made from that place tend to hold. They tend to produce the kind of peace that, in retrospect, confirms itself as the right call, even when it did not feel entirely certain at the time. You will grieve. That is not a warning. It is simply a truth, and it is not a problem. Grief is what genuine investment looks like when it closes. Let it move through you at whatever pace it requires. Do not rush past it or attempt to bypass it entirely. The grief is proportional to the meaning. And the meaning, even inside something that hurt you, was real. Honor it, then keep moving. On the other side of this, beyond the transition, the discomfort. The unfamiliar quiet of a life no longer organized around something that was draining you. There is a version of your daily experience you have not yet had access to. A morning that does not begin with low-level dread. A sense of your own time as genuinely yours. An energy that is no longer entirely consumed by damage control. That version of your life is not a fantasy. It is the natural outcome of consistently choosing your own well-being without apology. You are not the person who could not leave. That is a chapter. That is not your character. The decisions you make from this point forward are what shape what comes next. And what comes next does not have to resemble what came before. You carry more agency over the direction of your life than the heaviness of your current circumstances makes it easy to feel. That agency activates the moment you decide to use it. Do not wait until you feel ready, because readiness is not the starting point. Action is. Readiness forms in the aftermath of the first honest step. Take the step, make the call, have the conversation, draw the line. Whatever the first real move looks like in your particular situation, make it. Not when conditions improve, not when you feel stronger. Now, while this clarity is still present, and before the familiar pull of inertia begins talking you back into position, and before you go, if something in this video landed for you today, take a moment and drop a comment below. Tell me, what is the one thing you know it is time to walk away from? You do not need to have everything figured out. Just name it. Because naming it honestly, even in a comment, is its own small act of courage, and courage is always where real change begins. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Hit the like button so more people can find it. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology of becoming someone you are genuinely proud to be, subscribe, because that is exactly what we do here every single week. The best chapter of your life is not behind you. It begins the moment you stop letting fear write the next one.